So, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. And I keep on saying this, right? Sometimes I listen back to myself and I think, Simon, you said it again. Have I got a treat for you? Well, that's because we already have treats. We already have people with huge hearts and huge passion for adoption. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Astrid Castro. So Astrid is an adoptee. She was adopted from Colombia, and she also she's the exec director of an organization called Adoption Mosaic, and she has put her whole heart and soul into the adoption space, following an earlier career as a snowboarder. So that makes her pretty unique. I don't think we've ever had an ex-snowboarder on the show, and what a transition from snowboarder to general all-round adoption expert and thought leader. And so welcome to the show, Astrid.
Thank you so much. And I have to say, we should put XX, like it's been that many years that I should probably get 2 X's for how long it's been since I've been a snowboarder. But yes, it is on my list.
Yeah. Do you you don't snowboard at all anymore then, or just?
It's no longer even very much of an accessible hobby at this point. It's to drive up to the mountain. I live in a place that it doesn't snow a whole lot, but we do have a mountain nearby, but just the amount of money and time and energy to do it just doesn't really make sense. No. Yeah, so
it's an expensive thing. And I was supposed to be going skiing this week, okay. Which is an expensive thing, and it's even more expensive when your mates bail out on the skiing trip, and you've bought a ticket, and you know, skiing on my own is not something that I want to do.
It's not as fun. No, it's not.
It's not really fun. So hopefully we will go. I haven't been skiing for like 5 years, but yeah, snowboarding, I've never tried that. It took me long enough to get something okay on skis, right? So I'm not going back to the bottom of that learning curve for snowboarding.
Yeah. Well, I was a snowboard instructor before I became I did any competitive racing, and I have to say I actually think I enjoyed more teaching people how to snowboard than actually competing, which maybe says something about my personality. I don't know.
Yeah. It's all about others. Yeah. So can the name of the podcast is Thriving Adoptees. What comes to your mind when you think of thriving adoptees rather than thriving snowboarders, I guess?
Thriving adoptees. I think about mental health and being in a place where you can talk about your adoption experience with language, with clear communication, because you've been given that language and you've been given the ability to express your emotions around it. Those are, to me, those are huge feats, unfortunately, in this work. I think that there's so many of us who are still very new to this language and new to expressing how we feel about it, because we haven't been modeled what that looks like, right? So when I think about thriving, so I myself, there are certain aspects of my adoption where I think I'm more thriving than in others when it comes to my personal experience of my lived experience of being an adopted person. So, you know, I thought I had everything figured out, and I knew how to respond to any question that anybody had about adoption. And then something happens in my life that changes all of that. For example, 11 years ago, I found my birth mother. And even though I was 11 years ago, I was doing the work that I'm doing today in some capacity. I was an adoption educator, supporter of offering support and education to adoptees, adoptive parents, birth first parents, and so forth. And I had heard at that point, I had heard so many experiences and stories around adoption that I felt, oh, if I ever find my birth mother or go back, there's not, what surprises could be there, right? And I found a huge surprise, and I've spent the last 11 years unpacking that and figuring out and navigating that and figuring out how to be a thriving adoptee within that lived experience. Because there's not a whole lot of people ahead of us who have modeled to us what it looks like to be open and expressive of how we feel about it, because sometimes we don't even have the words to talk about how we feel about it.
Yeah. Wow. You said the word unpacking. There's quite a lot of unpacking there. I'm going to go back to the top of what you said, and I'm gonna try something out that I've not actually done this before on the podcast, and it's just kind of spooky because I've done about 140 of them. So first things first, have you heard of a guy called Sydney Banks? Have you heard that name?
Sydney Banks. That doesn't sound familiar.
Okay. So he was a Scottish welder that from Glasgow, which is a tough part of Scotland, who emigrated to Canada and worked on Vancouver Island or one of the islands. No, something Spring Islands near Vancouver. Salt Spring Island. Okay. And he worked in a factory. I think he was a welder, and he was adopted. He died, right? He died, I don't know, 5-10 years ago. But in the 70s, he was an adoptee, and he had his kind of an enlightenment experience. And one of the phrases that he says is, everybody's living in the middle of great mental health. I'm not sure if he used the word great. He used the word in pure mental health, something like that. Only we don't realize it.
Okay.
And I thought, when I heard him say that, I was watching him on a video, I was watching him on a video. And then a bit later on, I found out that he was adopted. And I thought, wow, he doesn't talk much about that, because he wrote loads of books, and he did loads of videos and did lots of sessions, and he has taught people who have now taught people who have now taught people. So there's like 2 or 3 generations of people who are talking what he talked about, and he was adopted. But everybody's living, I think he used the word perfect. I think everybody's living in the midst of pure, perfect mental health, only that they don't see that. And he also said something like, if only we could realize, if only we could not be afraid of our experience, that would change the world. Does that mean anything to you? Because it kind of means stuff to me, but I've listened to a lot of his stuff.
Yeah. That notion, if only we could realize and not be afraid. I think what comes up for me when I hear that is, I think oftentimes we're afraid of the unknown, right? And when I hear that and I relate that to adoption and the adoptee experience, I think about how many things we are left in the dark with, how many things we have not been given a platform or an opportunity or a listening ear, an informed, educated listening ear, right? Which sometimes means a therapist, sometimes means a consultant, maybe sometimes it means somebody who has done their homework or has their own language, and there's some common ground. I don't have to explain, you and I don't have to explain to each other the lived experience of being an adopted person. Yet we have, very different lived experiences. So there's a baseline. And so when I think about fear and if only we could realize and not be afraid, I don't think we can realize and not be afraid until we've been given language and a space to, whether it's our bodies or our minds or words and language. Sometimes it's just healing just to be sitting with somebody that has a lived experience that's similar to yours, right? And we talk a lot about, at Adoption Mosaic, we talk a lot about adoptee isolation. And we also talk a lot about racial isolation. And those two things combined, for those of us who are transracially adopted, interracially adopted, I think a lot of the spaces that we're coming from is that isolation. And so we don't have a space to realize. And so the realization can't exist if we're not given space to. And then the result of that becomes fear.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's what comes up for me.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of a better way to express what I've heard from this guy and people that have learned from him and learned from other people that learned from him, right? So one of the metaphors that they use is kind of I don't think it's kind of a Buddhistish metaphor. So what they'll say is, we're in the middle of perfect mental health, only we don't realize that. One of the ways that he would express that would be through a metaphor such as, we're the sky, okay? That's who we are. That's the truth of who we are, and that sky is hidden sometimes behind clouds, right? So if we say anger, so if I talk about my own adoption stuff and my own stuff in life, right, I would say there's been clouds of anger. So you could look at that. You could say, right, well, it's a massive dark storm cloud that has obliterated, not obliterated, obscured. It's completely covered over the whole of the sky, and it's been dark and foreboding, and it's completely hidden me. Whereas there's been other clouds of feelings and thoughts. So insecurity, for example, which isn't quite as scary as a storm cloud. And so you can, and it's not quite as all encompassing, and it's not completely obscuring the whole of the sky, right? Okay. But we're, as human beings, we're focused very much on the clouds in our life. So you could say the cloud of insecurity that I mentioned is very closely aligned to the cloud of not knowing, ignorance. Like, we're curious, we want to know stuff, that we feel there's picture. But all those clouds, right, whatever the cloud, it doesn't actually change the sky. It doesn't change who we are. It just hides who we are. And so does that make any more sense?
Yeah, no.
Oh, okay.
No, I guess what I'm hearing you say is that there that your interpretation of this is that there's of Sydney Banks' quote around that everyone is living in or has access to pure, perfect mental health. We just don't realize it. Is that beyond the cloud, there's clarity, there's blue skies.
Okay, so let me make a let me make a better, let me try and make a better fist of it, right? So who we are is the sky, and that represents perfect mental health.
Okay. So okay.
That's and we don't realize that, we don't see the mental health for ourselves because it's hidden by the clouds.
So, but if we're the sky, then we're above the clouds.
Yeah, but we can't see that. We can't see our innate mental health, which is the nature of the sky, because the clouds get in the way. We are not our feelings. We are the background on which our feelings we're on the backgrounds on which our feelings appear.
Yeah.
And because but as it seems to be something to do with the nature of who we are as humans, that we're focused on our feelings and our thoughts rather than the purity, the pure mental health that we are behind all that.
So I don't think that, and this might just be a philosophical difference between the two of us, is that I don't think we can separate our feelings and our being from our beingness. So I think that the clouds very much encompass a part of who we are, and living with, like, existing without the clouds is, I don't know that is something that I would aim for in my own life, because I think the clouds and being able to identify them, and eventually getting to a place where I can identify them and understand them and exist together and cohesively and allow, because to me, I think we spend a lot of time talking about how to exist without the darkness of the things that made us who we are, or and I can tell you, I have a lot of clouds in my past and in my history, and I've learned how to talk about them. I've learned how to share so others can learn, or that I can learn from others when I do share. Like, I'm constantly learning about how to manage. I mean, I'm just sticking with the metaphor of clouds, but how to manage to live in unison, because clouds bring rain that nourish the earth, that are so vital to the existence of everything that is on this planet. I mean, if we're going to go beyond that, I can say I'm probably not in a place where I can talk beyond that, but just the idea of embracing and holding space for that is so important.
Can you see now why I haven't raised this topic before with another adoptee? Because it's a tricky one, right?
It is, and I think that it does take some thinking as far as how we sit with ourselves, and how we sit with the hard parts of ourselves, the darkness, the clouds, the emotions, the feelings, the joys, the both and. So we're talking a lot, I feel like, in adoption land and adoptee land, we're talking about the both and so much these days, right? I'm sure you've heard of this.
You mentioned
as well.
you mentioned this last time when we were speaking, and as you were speaking, I thought of the kind of the next stage on. So the first stage is one of separating ourselves from our thoughts. Okay, and then once that separation has and bearing in mind, I've been doing, I've tried cloud management. Okay, it didn't work for me.
Oh,
but I've been, I've been separating myself from the cloud, right, for probably 12, 13 years. And that's stage one. And then it's about embracing. It's about going back in. So I'm not as I expressed it to you, I only expressed kind of phase one. Phase two is then going back out into the clouds, into exploring the feelings and the thoughts and digging around in there, but with less danger. So it's a bit like enjoying a film, because we know that we know it's a film. So if we're cut, so we're out. The first stage is being a little less involved in the drama, and then the next phase is actually getting fully engaged in the drama. So one of the ladies, one of my mentors that I listen to at the moment, she says that some people will go to a movie, a scary movie, and they know they're going to be scared, right? That was the point, and if the movie's not scary enough, then they'll complain because it wasn't scary enough, right? So it's like fear sometimes will pay to be scared. Like I've been to the first time I went to the States, so 42 years ago, whatever it was. I went to Disney World in California, and I went on the runaway train ride, whatever it's called, Thunder Mountain, to be scared. It's like sometimes we pay to be scared, and then sometimes we're like, well, sometimes I pay to be scared. My parents paid for me to be scared, right? But sometimes I'm scared about being scared. I used to worry about worrying, but sometimes we actually want to be scared. I don't particularly like horror movies, but some people do. So it kind of depends. Our attitude to our own fear is dependent on the context in which the fear is going to be dealt with. So,
but what I'm hearing is that a big part of that is being in control of when you get to say, I want to pay to get on this roller coaster because I like the adrenaline and what comes up for me in that. And your partner who says, yeah, no, I'm going to sit this one out. I'll sit on the bench and I'll watch you from over here. Thank you. And I don't think either one of those people, right, are right or wrong or better or worse or any of that. I'm the one who's going to pay the money to sit on the for sure. Definitely. I love me some adrenaline, that's for sure. And but being able to be in control of that, I think is the big difference.
Yeah. And we're not in control, are we? I mean, in reading The Primal Wound, whatever, 6 years or so ago, one of the things that Nancy Verrier says that we all want to control stuff. She said adoptees want to control stuff, and I thought, yeah, well, that's me. And then I thought, well, everybody else does too, right? It seems to be part of the human condition, the desire to control stuff, and when we feel like, when my clouds are out of control, right?
Yeah.
It's scary as hell.
Yeah.
It's scary as hell when our clouds are totally out of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to loop back to what you said as far as when you read The Primal Wounds, and I know you have some strong feelings about that.
Yeah.
And so I'm not suggesting we jump into that. I haven't read it for a while, but what I remember is that, yes, you're absolutely right. You read that and you're like, oh, yes, that relates to me. That absolutely speaks to me. I want to be in control. And of course, I mean, that's the human, for most people don't like to be out of control all the time. I don't think I've ever met anybody who, so that sentence or that phrase, that concept relates to most people. Yes. I think the part that doesn't relate to most people is that so many of us started our lives off with zero control, right? In chaos, and started our lives off, or whether it was in chaos or in choices and decisions were made that we are still living out today that we didn't have any control over, around
Totally.
being raised in racial isolation, or parents that didn't speak Spanish, and we came, at 4.5 and 6 years old only speaking Spanish. Like when you write that down on paper, when you hear that out loud, an adult to an adult, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to not have a system in place for, if we're talking about child-centered adoptions, that we don't have a system in place to help a child who is 4.5 and another child who is 6 years old get on a plane by themselves, meet new parents who don't speak the language, and not have an interpreter for at least the first 2 months or however long, right?
Yeah.
But back in those days, there was all this concern and worry that, oh, well, then they might attach to a translator as opposed to the parents, and God forbid, and all of this. And so I think that what I read when I hear you repeating that, as far as that notion of everybody wants to be in control. So kind of what's different from us to everybody else, I would say it's the reason we're still talking about this, and that a lot of other people aren't, is because we started off in our existence with zero control of decisions that are still harming or hurtful today.
Yeah. I mean, there's two incredibly valid points there, and I think there's the, yeah, I guess I was thinking, are there two things, chaos and out of control? I mean, there's the out of control emotions, and then there's the out of, then there's this situation as well. You've come from one place. Did you say you traveled on your own? You and your sister were on your own on the plane.
They gave us an escort, but this person, we didn't know this person. It might as well have been another person sitting on the plane, who escorted us to here, but she wasn't one of our caretakers.
So that's got to be a really, really scary experience, that, and as you say, a total loss of control, and I guess for it's I was thinking about other kind of chaotic environments that adoptees may have come from, like people that they're adopted from, adopted out of care. They've come from, they've been adopted out of care. They've been like in the UK, and I'm sure it happens in the States now. Kids that are actually removed, they're removed because of neglect, because of abuse, because of issues with their birth parents. So that's an out of control environment, as opposed to shock of the two different this is real life, people. Astrid's just muted herself because her dog's gone. The dog's gone out of control. Maybe just somebody's arrived, you know. So yeah, you've got the control thing. So all these backgrounds to our own adoption experience are obviously completely different. I didn't go through that, and as a white guy adopted by white folks, I didn't have that other layer of complexity, and so I can't really begin to understand that kind of racial isolation that you're talking about. So all these early start pieces, early start histories, are about a lack of control, whatever it is, and therefore we're seeking that control, and we're also seeking information. Often we're seeking information. We're curious, to put it mildly, or we are desperately trying to get to the bottom of what happened to us in the past and why it happened to us in the past, and all that adds up to a whole load of insecurity.
Yeah. And I think about, like, and I'm not sure if because we were talking about both and. I think you were gonna maybe mention something, or we had talked in a couple of meetings ago about some that concept of the both and. So I don't know if this is going to derail us, but I just want to say this unknown, the concept of this the unknown, right? That so many of us adoptees exist in, not knowing the full story. And it's really interesting. I think I lived my entire life imagining that I was going to find my birth mother, and she was going to clear all of those cobwebs, get rid of all those clouds you're talking about, right? And it just was going to be this like magical moment where she was going to answer all the questions that I had. The one thing that I didn't take into consideration was that she is human, and that she's a human who has lived in whatever her own traumas and her own experiences that haven't allowed her to retain the information that I thought I needed in order to be a whole, healthy person. And so when I met her, I had my list, right? had my list of my little checklist. Okay, so how long did you nurse us? At what age did I walk? What age did my sister walk? Because I was adopted with my biological sister. Yeah. And some of these like basic things, because by the time I had met her, I had a child of my own. And so I had all of these birthing questions and walking and feeding and solid food and this and that. And I'm laughing now because the ridiculousness of both me thinking that she would be able to retain this information that I only retain because I have the comfort and the privilege of not having the chaos in my life that she had at that time of losing her two babies, right? Which superseded everything as far as her needing or wanting her to manage memories about how old we were when we walked and how long we nursed and what birth was it, cesarean or vaginal or, all of these things that I was just so curious and wanted answers. I also wanted answers to some of the hard conversations around how she lost us and what relinquishment meant and the whys and what my first 4 years of my life and some of the things that my sister had remembered around living with her. And but I thought to myself, I'm not going to ask those really hard, heavy questions, because I'm going to go ask these really easy, non-emotional questions, which she doesn't remember, she doesn't know. And so what I think the journey that I've been on in this last 11 years has been about how do I live with, and I'll bring this back to the both and. How do I live with myself in joy and happiness and excited to wake up and live every single day with the both of I deserve the answers to these questions, and I will probably never get them, right? So that both and of living in that existence is what I think so many of us adoptees have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not a Buddhist, right? But I'm going to bring in a Buddhist thing here, right? It's kind of it's detachment. It's about detachment. So for example, and that only comes from an insight. So I've been very attached to stuff.
Like material stuff or emotional stuff, or both?
I don't think I've been attached. Well, kind of. I had an expectation, right? So I had an expectation that certain things were going to make me happy. Material things, okay. So and then through insight, I realized that they hadn't. Okay, so I'm talking material things, and I'm a bloke, so I'm talking cars, right? I'm talking Porsches and Lotuses and things like that. So I had I didn't really have an attachment, but I thought that they would, and then they didn't. You know, I thought that kind of material success was going to make me happy, and then it didn't. Is the big one, right, for me. Okay. Emotional stuff, yes, very attached to emotional stuff. And but kind of right now, over the last 10 years, I've been very attached to making a big difference. And I've also been attached to making a living by making a big difference, right? And I've been very cheesed off with before I came into the adoption space professionally. I was doing work in elementary schools, nothing to do with adoption, but everything to do with kids' happiness and emotional intelligence. And
you'll have to clarify something. I think it's a language thing. You said cheesed off?
Cheesed off. Oh yeah, pissed off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarification.
Yeah, it's okay. Just a bit of English.
Learned something new just now.
British idiom there. Yeah. So the stuff with the kids was great. They inspiring the kids and empowering the kids and helping them realize that empowering them to make their dreams come true, and whether that dream was something in the world or something in their heads or their hearts. So football player, or being happy, not being immune to other kids, making them upset, right? Doing that stuff was an absolute dream, and I loved it. But I couldn't get the schools didn't the schools didn't really seem to appreciate when the kids had shared great insights, and the teachers didn't seem to react, didn't seem to be impressed by that. They didn't seem to be impressed by what their kids had learned, and that made me really cheesed off. I really pissed off. And also the fact that the schools, although they said that they really cared about the kids' happiness, their actions to me didn't stack up. They didn't match with that. They if they cared about their kids' happiness, then they would have been all over me like a rash. Yeah, they would have wanted more. They would have seen what the kids got out of this stuff and wanted more, and they didn't. So when I sent them, so I was really attached to what I was attached to making a living out of it, and I was pissed off that I couldn't make a living out of it, right? So now it took, like I really, really struggled to see that cloud. Yeah, I struggled to see that cloud, and I got glimpses through it. I got glimpses of it, and then and now I've come into the adoption world on the and I'm not attached to it. I want more people to listen to the podcast, right? I want to do more speaking engagements with partners. I want to do that, but I'm not attached to it. So, well, not as attached, like there's still a little bit there that, it kind of comes and goes, but most of the time it's not there. I've recently decided to kind of like cash in part of my pension. So I'm taking away any pressure whatsoever I'm taking a practical action. That means that I can throw myself completely into making a big difference in the adoption world, but have nothing on it. That's detachment. So what does that mean to anybody? Like I'm thinking, it's about that expectation thing. So when we go into a search, when we go into a conversation with a bio mum, to if we can want the answers, as you say, and be okay with not getting the answers, then we're kind of we're setting ourselves up for success. Whereas see a lot of people who are pinning all their hopes. All their hopes are there, and that this is going to be their. This is going to save them. The end of the search. The end of the search. The end of the search is going to, and the answers to the questions are going to make them happy, and then they're setting themselves up for a tough time if it doesn't work out, right?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest problems that we have in this, in adoption and in this industry, as far as what could be really helpful, is knowledge and modeling, and having others that have walked this path, and those others being in a space where they have the language and are able to share their experiences. So this next generation has at least a platform. They can change the platform, from pebbles to wood to marble to whatever. And my hope is that every generation will change that platform, will help us get to a place where we can have deeper conversations about these things. And that me sharing, you sharing, us having this opportunity, that you're doing this podcast and giving creating a platform in a sense. And that my hope is that people will hear these conversations and say, oh, so now when I go do a search, I won't have the same expectations perhaps because I've had somebody help me plant a seed in my head of maybe what it looks like if I don't get those answers. It doesn't have to destroy me. It doesn't have to make me feel unwhole, right? I don't have to feel fragmented. And that's not to say there aren't, you know, it's not a cakewalk. It's not something that there aren't days that I still wish that I had the answers. There aren't days that, you know, I just talked to my birth mother this last weekend, and she started telling a story about when she gave birth to me, and I was taking notes like crazy, and so then I could piece it all together later. Of course, I still want those things. Just because I have found a way to live with the unknown doesn't mean that I wouldn't invite the known to come in if it came knocking on my door.
Yeah. When you're talking about the platform, the thing that came into my head was kind of like our grounding, how grounded we are. Does that?
No, I'm talking more about like the space in which we give others to share their stories.
Okay.
Right.
So that platform. Okay.
Yeah, that platform. Exactly. The one, yeah, grounding ourselves and putting our roots into the ground and the earth, and acknowledging that we came into this world in the same way that everybody else did, but because we're not born to our parents, that concept is challenging for some. That grounding feeling in that I came and I am a part of this world in the same way everybody else. I was, you know, conceived and born, but I don't live with the people that birthed me, and or that I'm biologically related to. I like to talk a lot about legacy. I don't think that that's talked about very much either. And I know we probably don't have time to jump into that, but maybe you and I can have a conversation about that. Is what does legacy building look like for us adoptees? And I have lots to say about that.
Yeah.
And that's part of this big picture, right?
Yeah, I want to go back to this search thing just to share. So I started my search. I got the original birth certificate with my birth mother's name on, I don't know, 8 years ago, and then I stopped, and then I picked up the search again, right? As a response to sheer terror, and me not. I'm not gonna stop this. I'm not gonna let my fear or my terror of rejection, in inverted commas again, stop me searching.
Okay.
Which is a bit of a weird one. What you've done far more in this area. What do you see in terms of the emotions around search and reunion, around through the process? What do they look like, and how do they differ for different people? Because I think it's kind of validating to hear people who feel the same way as us. Absolutely. But I've been outside of within my adoption story and within other areas of this, I've been coached a lot, and a lot of coaching.
You've been coached.
I've been coached a lot, and part of a coach's role is to question from with empathy and respect, to encourage us to question how we feel, right? So if we go into these places online, right, and everybody validates where we are, that sometimes doesn't help us move on, right?
So I believe that it is important from my position as somebody who places herself as an adoption professional. I am an expert in what I've learned up until now, and I say that way only because I don't like to say I am an expert in adoption, because there's so much to learn. This next generation is teaching me so much. And in order for me to say that I'm doing a good job, that I'm serving my community, that I believe that my job individually, and I'm not saying that I think that adoptees should be doing this necessarily. I mean, I think this is probably a good thing to do in life in general, whereas I have the people in my life that are very in line with the way I think, right? I could be talking to myself, kind of thing. There are these people who confirm, yes, there are other people who think like you, and you're in line with a certain community and a certain group of people. It is really critical for me, in order for me to, exactly what you're saying, in order for me to grow and continue to bring new thoughts, is for me to go outside of the people who are in line with me. So I have mentors in my life that I very much consider my mentors, that think very differently than I do, that are educating and teaching me about different ways to look at this. That's what makes me a whole rounded professional when I think about the difference between something that makes someone who identifies as a professional versus somebody who has a lived experience.
Yeah.
And so back to your question around search and reunion. So Dr. Joyce McGuire-Pavo, if you're not familiar with her, she's fabulous, a true mentor of mine. I've known her, I think, for 25 years. She wrote the book. She's a psychologist, and she wrote the book, The Family of Adoption. And I saw her in a presentation early back in the day, and she said, why are we always putting these two words together, search and reunion? They're two different words. They're completely two different words. They're two different experiences. The search is one, and we have to hold space for that. And the reunion is another. And by putting them together, it almost makes it sound as if one happens and then the other is bound to happen. But that's not always the case. A lot of times we search and that's the end, right? And the result isn't reunion. And that doesn't mean that it's a successful or not successful. We just put so much weight on the end result of a search needs to be a reunion. And we know, as you know, with the work that you're doing, sometimes it's searching for self, it's searching for understanding, it's searching for answers, it's searching. So when I hear you say, X amount of years ago, I started this process, and then I slammed on the brakes and I said, whoa, I'm not doing this. And then I came back and said, nope, I'm going to take control over this terror, and I'm going to continue this search. I think is so many of our experiences that we start it, and oftentimes, I believe, because we don't have the support that we actually need to continue it, it does get scary, or it gets overwhelming, or it gets, I'm just not, you know what, this is too much work. I can't stop my life and dedicate myself to becoming an investigator for my own personal history on how I came into this world. I myself am, I started the search 15 years prior to finding Carmenza. And so I like to, the analogy that I experienced was, I put my big toe in this, what I didn't know. I thought it was just going to be a warm pool of water that I was just going to be able to like slowly go into and acclimate and jump in, and that would be that. But I put my big toe in, and it was this pot of boiling hot water that I like quickly pulled my big toe out and said, yeah, no, this is too much. I actually don't know what I'm doing. And then I slowly was continued the search, but just like putting my big toe in again. And then it became my whole foot. Then it became my whole leg. And eventually I got to a place where I think I had decided that if I don't ever find my birth mother, I'm gonna have to figure out what that looks like, to sit with self, with never completing this reunion that I thought was going to answer all my questions. So yeah, I think it's a very common thing.
I think we're always searching for happiness, and we see different routes to that happiness, whether it's whether it's a Porsche, whether it's a reunion, whether it's a glass of wine. I mean, we're always searching for happiness at the ultimate thing, and we always think we're always kind of like, to a lesser or greater extent, we're investing our happiness in a particular outcome. We've got expectations. That's kind of where we are. I love your metaphor of pulling your toe out because the water was boiling. And the thing that came to my mind, I was talking about going to Disney like 43 years ago. It was this time of year, roughly this time of year. It was pretty hot in LA, and I dived into a pool which I thought was going to be warm, and it wasn't, and it was absolutely freezing. So I'm quite a swimmer. I just steamed to the other end of the pool, jumped out, and then, right, I'm not going in there again. It's absolutely freezing. The search and reunions. So yeah, what a great perspective to separate those into two things, because they are two separate things. I did the search, and the reunion didn't happen because my birth mother died 15 years before I started the search. So there was no reunion. And yet, that's when we're really bad at predicting how we're going to feel in certain situations. When we're really bad at predicting how we're going to feel when X or when Y happens, or X or Y doesn't happen. This whole thing is not a great human skill, predicting our future emotions. So and all those clouds swirling around of uncertainty, and this will make me whole, this will make me fulfilled, this one. But I think it is a search for happiness or self, or both, or even just an end to the crap going around our heads. This is the one thing I'd love your thoughts on, is that the story in my head was not true, right? So we keep on, everybody's encouraging people to share their stories, and me too, you know, I ask people about their stories all the time. And yet the story in my head about my birth mother was completely false. So if I'm just regurgitating a story that isn't true, then it kind of puts me in, it seems to be rather fruitless, a fruitless thing to be doing. Can you help me make sense of that?
Yeah, I think fantasy is a part of the human condition, right? And to strip us from that, that doesn't make sense, right? I do a workshop for adoptive parents on talking with children about adoption. And I use this analogy that I grew up, I call it my princess and prostitute analogy. So at different stages in my life, it was very dependent on my developmental stage and what I knew about the world around me, right? So when I was very little, the fantasy was my birth mother was a princess, like literally a princess in Colombia. She was busy running the country and she didn't have time to take care of these two active, busy girls. So she had to go and find somebody that would help, right? There was this very fairy tale, very princess-like. And then I grew up and I started seeing things in the media and seeing the world differently. And then in my mind, I thought, oh, the only people who lose their children to adoption are drug addicts and abusers and people who are homeless and all of these horrible things, right? So then my fantasy, it was still a fantasy, right? It just wasn't a positive one. But my fantasy turned into would envision my birth mother laying on the side of the street with a needle hanging out of her mouth, and she had just OD'd and she had foam coming out of her mouth, because that's the image that we see of when people OD, right? And that she was prostituting. Her profession was that she was a prostitute to make a living. And when I talk to parents about that, I say to parents, are either one of those anywhere close to the reality? In my life, no, it wasn't. And I know of a woman who did a search, found out that she was the princess of a community in her country. I don't remember, it's a country in Africa, but that she found out that she was a princess, right? And then I know somebody else who has found out that they did have a birth mother who was a prostitute and who was addicted, right? The extremes do exist, but the reality is that most of us exist somewhere in the middle of all of that, right? So why are we allowing children to fantasize in these extremely unhealthy ways when all we really need to do is help them unpack their stories, so that by the time they're 18 or off on their whatever age, magic age it is that we think that children are ready to conquer the world by themselves, which we know 18 is not the age. I ask any person that I know.
No, it's 18. It's 18 and a half, isn't it?
It is. The half. Yes. There you go. That's where we went wrong. And what I say to parents, it is your job to help your child break down those stereotypes and for them to launch into adulthood without imagining either one of those, right? And that there is a reality. Most parents do have maybe even just a little bit of information of why the child went into care, or some speculations. And those speculations are usually not one of these two extremes, right?
Yeah.
Oh.
Have you heard of Byron Katie?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm listening to one of her books at the moment, and the big question is it true? Right? Doing the work, is it true? And there's more to it than is it true. There's 4 questions around that, and this is the second book that I've read of hers. The first book was a little bit more psychological, and this is a little bit more spiritual. And I'm at home more with that side of the stuff, the kind of more spiritual take on this. But yeah, is it true? And we've got these. Yeah, that's the fundamental thing. Is the story? To what extent is the story in our head true? To what extent? I mentioned this yesterday when I did a recording yesterday, and I picked it from somebody else. Are we listening to CNN, or is it the comedy channel, or is it the horror channel? I guess is it the horror channel. That is one of the biggest questions out there. And a bigger question. I heard somebody reminded me of this. I listened to something today, and apparently it wasn't Einstein that said it. The biggest question of all is the universe a friendly or an unfriendly place?
Yeah.
Big questions.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you'd like to close off with, Astrid?
Just thank you. Thank you for holding this space. Thank you for the work that you're doing in bringing adoptees and giving them that platform that we're talking about. I think this work is so important, and it's emotional, and sometimes it's hard, and sometimes it's so rewarding to be able to sit with another adoptee, and to think that you and I talked about this, to think, I mean, as much as the pandemic has brought so much heartache and hardship and death and sadness, it has also brought things like this possible. And how grateful I am that you reached out, and so thank you. And folks can, I don't know if you put information on where folks can reach me. The other thing that just letting your community know that to learn more about Adoption Mosaic, you can visit our website. You can learn about that. We are always looking for adult adoptees who are wanting to share their experiences and their stories with the community. And we have a program called We the Experts, Adoptee Speaker Series, which, Simon, next year you're going to be on. We've been talking about that and excited for that. So yeah, just let's stay in community and keep talking.
Yeah. So as always, listeners, I don't always mention this, right? Every episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast has show notes. It's the jargon, apparently, show notes. And the show notes are links to the if the guest has a website. Obviously, Astrid has a website for Adoption Mosaic. There's always links to their website if they've got them, and there's also links to them to their social media channels, so you can connect them with on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And there's usually a bio as well. So if I can harvest a bio from a guest's website, then I do that as well. And so go and check like Astrid stuff. Like, I was talking earlier on about people. I was talking earlier on about me being attached to making a difference. When Astrid shared with me how much she's got going on, and when I saw when it figured out how long the wait is for this for being involved in this program, Astrid's got a lot of people doing, a lot of people doing a lot of different things with her, and I consider her as a real leader in this space, and I'm not blowing anything up anybody's. So I would urge you to check out what she's doing, because I'm figuring what's she doing? You know, what's she doing? What's she doing? And because I'd like to be doing more. I'd like to be making more impact. So thank you very much, Astrid. And we will talk very soon. And maybe you can come on later in the year. We can talk about that legacy stuff that you were.
I would love that.
Yeah,
yes.
Let's do that.
Absolutely.
So stay tuned for that, listeners. And in the meantime, we'll speak to you very soon. Thanks for listening. And thank you, Astrid, once again. Bye-bye.